Hello and welcome to Minimise Debt, Maximise Cash with Top Service, where each episode we will give you tips on how to maximise your cash and minimise your debt in the construction industry. My name's Emma Reilly, Top Service CEO, Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management and current CICM Council Advisory Member representing Trade Credit. In this episode, we continue our series of excerpts from our October 2025 seminar, Managing Retentions. There were a lot of principles shared that we think are good to remind ourselves of. This episode is about non-payment contract clauses. You will hear Philip King asking the questions and Guiseppe Parla of Menzies and Simon Howell of Tarmac answering. If you hear anything that is of value to you, please register for our newsletters on our website and we will let you know when the next webinar is. The link to register is in the show notes of this episode.
Someone said they'd be grateful for advice on common contract clauses / excuses relied on by paying contractors or end customers which are illegal under current legislation. Oh, one for you, Guiseppe, there.
Really?
The word legal.
I would refer to my lawyer on the job, actually. Yeah.
Which is always good advice.
Yes.
Simon, have you come across any?
Well, we do, and we rely on. We have a number of sort of managing QS for the whole of Tarmac on our contracting side, who we would look to actually manage the whole process. So if it's a standard NEC contract or something of that ilk, then it's very, very clear what those contract clauses are. However, going back to, and I can't remember who said it, I think it was Charlie mentioned that it was about agreeing, don't start work until you've agreed the contracts. That happens in big companies, that happens a lot in small companies. So it's about making sure that you go through that contract and pick up those things. Quite often these things are just waved through, or even in many cases, certain clauses not agreed in writing. This is about, it's basics. This is about basics where you have a contract, you do the work for somebody to agreed standard, to a timescale and all the other bits. Their part of the contract is to pay you. And then it's making sure that if there are errors or other issues which could be caused, that you actually go through and apply the contract clauses. So that wouldn't be necessarily just pulling away off site. That could be pay less notices. It could be all of those elements. There are elements that they have to do to you. So if they're just simply withholding money and the contract says they should have provided you with a pay less notice, they're not in the contract. And so you've just got to make sure, and it's actually about understanding what contracts are about far better, and generally the understanding of what contracts are, certainly in many customers, is pretty dire, to be quite frank.
Sure. I think, Philip, in our scenario, because it's obviously insolvency and I'm not trying to build a relationship, we can be fairly forthright with the action we're going to take. So it's more difficult when the company's still trading. You want to work with these people again, but equally, if they're dragging their feet along to not pay, then you want to apply the right pressure. In my scenario, we can get quite aggressive with it because the relationship is done. There's no further. So it's slightly different for us. But yes, we would be using our lawyers to recover a hell of a lot.
The issue of contracts is really interesting, isn't it? I remember visiting a roofer in the Midlands, probably 9-10 years ago, and I went to see him because he got a particular large contractor that wasn't paying him, and they weren't paying him because he hadn't fulfilled some of the terms of the contract, and therefore they just said, we don't have to pay because you haven't done what you agreed to do. And his complaint to me was that the Friday before they wanted him to start work, a 25-page contract hit his desk. He, frankly, without being rude, didn't have the mental capacity to understand a 25-page contract. His skill was, roof tiles and roof trusses and stuff. And he was He was really good at that, but he wasn't good at administration. He had no real advice in business other than him. There was only 5 or 6 of them working in it. And he said, well, I couldn't understand it, but they said if I didn't sign it, I couldn't start work Monday. And so I signed it. And now they won't pay me because what I signed, I haven't done, or I couldn't do, or I didn't know I had to do. And that's not fair. And I said, no, it's not, but it's reality. And to be honest, the point at which you had power was on that Friday afternoon when you could have said, I'm not going on site on Monday because I'm not signing the contract. And they would have then been in trouble because they'd have been trying to get roofs on with no one to do them. And they couldn't have got someone at that short notice to replace you. So for about a couple of hours on that Friday afternoon, you had some power, but you didn't feel you had, and you chose not to use it. And as a result, you're now in a mess where you're not being paid and you're close to going bust because they're just using your non-signing of the contract, or rather, sorry, your non-adherence of the contract you signed as a reason for not paying you. And that's a real dilemma. It's as a small roofer, the last thing you want to do is to lose the next big job. So you want to do it, you feel you have to. But if you end up not getting paid, you could have stayed in bed and lost money. There's no benefits in doing that work if you end up not being paid and going through huge mental turmoil in order to try and get paid. But I think one of the things we have to do, and it's about, sort of responsible business at the top end, isn't it? Businesses recognizing that when they've got 3 lawyers working on a contract and they send it to a small roofer who has just himself, they're not really playing fair. And they need to recognize the power and the importance of the supply chain and smaller contractors.
Hello, Emma here again. Thank you for listening. If there are any other questions, please do contact us on LinkedIn. Just search Top Service Limited. And also do check out a video version of this podcast on our YouTube channel. Once again, search for Top Service Limited. If we don't see you online, we will see you in the next episode where we will help you to maximise your cash and minimise your debt. Bye bye from Top Service.